So our next speaker is a designer and paper artist based out of New York, and I kind of just want to leave the specifics of that a secret because what she does is so cool. She just finished up a month-long residency at the Exploratorium, and today she is going to be talking about a little bit about what she does. So please give a warm welcome to Kelli Anderson.
Thank you. Hey everyone. So you might notice that you were given a arts and crafts project. This whole talk is going to be kind of like kindergarten grad school, so this is like good like foreshadowing for that. And what we're making together are these hexaflexagons. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you the first step, and then I'm going to talk to you about my work for like 40 minutes or whatever. And then we're going to glue them together as the last step, because this first step kind of takes a while. So this is what we're building, and here is your first step. So you'll notice on the back of this hexaflexagon, they have all of these lines that are designated fold lines. And what I want you to do is the registration between the front and the back of the paper varies. So you might want to align it with the actual grid on the front, the little white lines. But go ahead and fold all of those creases. And I want you to fold them one way and then the other way, and like use your fingernail to get that crease really good. And what we're doing is we are priming the paper. Whenever you work on a paper engineering project and you put in a fold, you want the maximum amount of contrast in between the flexibility of the joint and the rigidness of the surface. And so by folding it back and forth, we're kind of like training it to be like direction agnostic so we can like make it into a shape. So while I'm talking, just go ahead and like pre-fold and crease those with your nail really well. And don't jump ahead to the gluing part yet, because I have like some specific instructions for that. So yeah, just pre-fold it. Cool. All right, so I am going to talk over your hard work. I am a graphic designer, pop-up book author, animator, tinkerer. I just got done being a fellow at the Exploratorium, and this is my most recent project, which is a paper animation for some friends of mine who have a product called Dropmark, which is like a fun like drag and drop visual bookmarking tool. And I thought it would be fun to show it here because it's my most recent project, but it's also all about like a California road trip, which I'm a New Yorker and I know nothing about, so. It's all about s'mores and like geodesic dome guides, I guess. This is what California is to me. I know you live here and probably know better, but yeah, so as a designer, there's historically been these dual tracks in my work, which have recently converged in a way that I'm pretty excited about. And the first track is I really like to explain invisible things. I've been designing infographics for years and years now and still do, and you know, the activity of data visualization is really about bringing facts from the abstract or numerical or invisible realm into the sphere of perception, so you can see, feel, and experience those facts. So the other side of my work's duality is that I'm really obsessed with things like this. Very simple things that seem like magic, but have no hidden parts. You know, so their totality is like visible to the human eye, but they behave in these complex ways that seem more sophisticated than the sum of their parts. So I like experimenting with this kind of lo-fi magic with objects, but then also I like tinkering with it to make like very strange animations. So this is something I figured out a couple months ago, that I could take a hydrophobic coating, Rain-X really, and cut out like little stencils on my vinyl cutter, coat it with Rain-X, and then it would like corral water into these shapes. And so as a graphic designer, I'm like, oh, I can make lettering. So. But you could also turn it into animation frames. So this is a Muybridge moving horse puddle. I haven't gotten much farther than this, but I was just like very thrilled that I was like, look, it's a puddle and it's running. This is what I do all day. Is anyone into risograph printing? Yeah, oh my gosh, I can barely see you, but I see at least one hand. Yes, risograph is, for those of you who don't know, it comes from like the beige universe of Xerox machines, so it's like this very like unassuming printer, but the inside of it works like silkscreen. So you like feed it a black and white image, and it makes a screen, and then you can print any color ink, well, any color of ink you have. So there's like all these cool fluorescent colors, and I think the most defining feature of the risograph is that it's completely uncontrollable. So like when you work with the risograph, it's really like navigating this relationship with a machine that doesn't want to do what you want it to do. And so I was like, all right, well, why don't I start trying to make animations out of risograph prints? So this is what I do. I make my frames in After Effects, and then I print them out, and they all kind of look the same on the sheet. But then when I put them together again, it's an animation. And this one was really like a test to see like how much detail and subtle movements I could pick up using this like weird uncontrollable process. I think this is my favorite one so far. So this one is 32 frames, and it just loops. But yeah, super fun. I think for once I've actually like successfully turned this into client work too. So this is like a little preview of like the most recent one I'm doing for a shoe company, which I'm probably not supposed to be showing you at all. But so there's a lot of this lo-fi magic stuff that exists firmly in the realm of novelty. Like you see it once, you know it's a trick, kind of like my cat with this wolf, and then you're never fooled again. So you know, there's that aspect to it, but I realize that there's also this opportunity to things behaving in ways that surprise us that's actually kind of educational. So when we talk about magic, we're talking about an instance when the world demonstrates to us that there's a blind spot in our understanding. This is a book that I made based on research by a Swiss scientist named Emin Gabrielen, which uses Moiré interference patterns to create this illusion of magnification when a screen of the same period is rotated upon a grid of dots. And it's a cool thing because like, it seems to reveal some fancy glitch in the material, but it's actually something that highlights a glitch in our perception. Our brains are basically these like pattern recognizing machines. You know, we always want to fill in the blanks. So, you know, for the same reason you can read a sign that's blocked by a tree when you're driving down the highway, your brain's doing the same thing here, where it's like, oh, it's a circle, and then you rotate it a little bit, and it's like, oh, it must be a bigger circle. So, of course, the circles aren't getting bigger or smaller, it's just about how we see them. So I really like stuff like this because I like getting people to ask why at things or objects or experiences that they've never before questioned, like paper especially. And I began appreciating the big impact that lo-fi experiences can have with this project that I worked on about 10 years ago. It was the first big design project I'd ever worked on, and it was with this activist group called the Yes Men. And this was something that was like sort of dreamed up by my friend Steve Lambert and then executed by many, many people, including me. And what we did was, early one Thursday morning, we wanted to blanket New York City with an alternate reality. And it was an alternate reality of our choosing, one featuring a more benevolent type of alternative facts, where we would end the war in Iraq, we would close Guantanamo, we'd create rail service that crisscrossed the United States, Appalachia got high-speed internet, the US government gave all the land back to Native people. We put in economic policies to put the country back on the path of equity rather than having the classes go farther apart. And we set the groundwork to keep all of these changes in place. So These are just headlines, but the paper was carefully written as this roadmap for progressive victories, all achieved through collective action and popular pressure. So we created this little utopian simulation where everything we wanted to came true. And we made it not through VR, any kind of technology really, but just with paper, by essentially hacking the authority of this familiar morning time object. So we dissected a New York Times. I found a style guide that someone had foolishly forgotten to set to no index. It showed up in Google search. So knew everything about like all the typeface decisions, kerning, leading, everything. So I could put it back together as this pristine counterfeit depicting a utopian future better than our own. And we didn't bother telling the New York Times about all these improvements. We just mass produced it. We silkscreened some very legitimate looking newsboy aprons. And we put it in the hands of hundreds of thousands of unsuspecting commuters one morning. And the hoax worked really well, because people could feel for a second like what a different world might be like. All of the volunteers were like, I want to pass out in front of the New York Times. It's really a shame this is the first big graphic design project I ever worked on, because now it's like, if I'm not like actively almost like getting arrested, it doesn't feel like I'm really doing good work. So, you know, we didn't change the world, and the alternative reality we made was pretty fleeting. Like for most people, it lasted like 6 seconds or something. But our fake newspaper got onto the real news all over the world, confounding news anchors in Thailand and Germany, in the United States. So it was fun because like we got people asking like, you know, well, you know, if these headlines are bullshit, like what other order in the world doesn't deserve our respect? And like, if I want these things and I live in a democracy, why can't I have those things? So we succeeded because, you know, we felt like fixed foundational reality just seemed more open to possibility and negotiation for a second. And going back to paper, I feel like it's just really hard to argue with something you're holding in your hands. So we also made a digital version of the New York Times and put it up, but like no one cared about that. But it was just that experience of like getting this newspaper that looked like the newspaper, that smelled like the newspaper, but told about a completely different story about how democracy works and the world that we live in. So I like this idea of like using wonder as a subversive force to prove to people that the world is more interesting, more complex, more full of possibility than they imagine. And this is a very simple card that I made for my friends around the holidays that does that at a much smaller scale than the New York Times project. And the way this works is paper doesn't forget how it was bent. Paper has this material memory, so you can essentially program it. And I was able to use that material memory to guide my friends to receive this card through the experience. So when you first pick it up, it's really floppy, and it's clear that it wants to bend in these very specific ways. And then as people bend it, it tells them the simple story. And it's basically a 4-frame documentary about receiving this card. And it's really, really simple, though. So this is an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper. Put it on both sides. There's like 10 cut marks in it, and then 2 glue dots. And it's one of those things where like I made it, and I kind of understand it, but I just really cannot explain to you why it works. So there are just like some aspects of knowledge that I'm able to like interact with in making a project like this that I can touch upon, but I don't fully grasp. And this is actually the same feeling that I get when I work on even like the most mundane types of graphic design projects, even very traditional stuff like menu design. Aesthetically, things work sometimes, and I cannot explain why. And it's because like all of this stuff is like working off of an infrastructure of visual culture and subtlety that I can't fully understand. For example, this is a menu that I designed for Russ and Daughters, which is like this 105-year-old appetizing store, Bagels and Lox place in the Lower East Side in New York. And I went through like 85 versions of the menu. And it was kind of this continual feeling of like, oh, well, one font clearly works better than another. White paper looks better than craft. This column layout looks better than, but it was just totally this like tinkering process where I was just feeling it out. But it ended up working out fine, and eventually got it designed and approved, and now they can serve food, which is great. But I think, I and a lot of other designers I've spoken with, I think we often have imposter syndrome, and we also find it difficult oftentimes to verbally defend our work because, we're really like exploring the unknown when we make anything. And it's because simple things just really aren't that simple at all, especially with design, because culture is always evolving. So as soon as you pin down something and say that, like, okay, millennial pink means young people, within a year, then those people are older, and it doesn't mean that anymore. So it's like always shifting. So I want to do an activity together to sort of like explore this idea of how simple things are complex and like how they're always changing. Colors, for example, like carry this cultural meaning. And so I have this color, kind of varies, but this is khaki. Does anyone have any associations with the color of khaki? Yeah, go ahead. Steve Irwin? Oh my gosh, you're right, totally. That's very relevant. Yeah, you'll see. Any other associations? You can just yell it out. I can't see you. Military, yeah. School uniforms, yes. Boy Scouts, totally. So what you all are getting at with these uniform things, khaki, pants. I like this photo of khaki pants because it has like an invisible human inside of it. So, khaki has this whole history and a lot of feelings around that history that we kind of inherit, which is largely dominated by its use as a textile throughout time. So these pictures here, I think, show the dominant source of khaki's mythology. Khaki typically alludes to adventure and conquest and masculinity and man-conquering nature and Steve Irwin. And all of that is inherited from these larger-than-life like explorer characters. Because being an explorer is like a very like appealing idea. So this is Hemingway and Teddy Roosevelt, and there are many others. But those are the two seen here participating in conservation of their time. And they got their khaki meaning from the hot weather uniforms of the British colonists in Africa. So these were the people that they were trying to emulate. And they got their khaki meaning from the color of the ground of the Masai Mara itself. So khaki originally served this practical purpose of camouflage. So khaki has this historically derived meaning that evolves as the context evolves, but the context has really changed, because there's no lions lurking over by the water cooler, and there's no cheetahs at TGI Fridays or on the golf course. So with khaki, it's a color where there's a real mismatch between like what we were promised and what we get. And I got this idea to write about khaki in particular from a line in a Ben Marcus essay in which he observes that khaki is so aggressively used to link mundane office life with robust wilderness trekking, the kinds of behavior, in short, that are the least likely to occur in modern life. So pretty much, I think that khaki is the color of empty promises. So I'm giving you this like deep dive into khaki because I think it's a useful way to show that all design, whether it's mechanical or aesthetic, like it always has this underlying infrastructure of meaning where it comes from. And we can continue to ask why. Why does it work? Why does it work? Why does it work? And if we look hard enough, there are answers, and they're really interesting, I think. Which is why whenever we're designing something, I think that the formula for that is basically we're creating something plus reasons. And hopefully those are reasons that reflect our values, reasons that reflect clear, careful observation of this endless but engageable complexity that underlies all experience, whether it's shared or something that you can hold in your hand. There's a complexity to how aesthetics work as well as like mechanical things that you can tinker with. The older I get, the more I realize that like much of the formalized knowledge that I had previously assumed just like dropped from the sky as abstract knowledge for mankind was actually first discovered by hand through this process of like tinkering and playing with things. This, for example, it kind of looks like a donut, but anthropologists believe that it's one of the first circles ever made by man, made simply through a gesture. Because when you rotate a small hard stone into a larger, softer rock, it digs in and establishes this fixed axis point and then scrapes away the softer rock at this consistent distance from the center. And the only shape that can result from such a gesture is a perfect circle. So long before geometry had the concept of a perfect circle, like humans were making them and engaging with them by hand. Or take a Mobius strip. Has anyone here made a Mobius strip? Oh wow, like everyone. This is amazing. You all are my favorite crowd. So like this is one entry point for understanding a Mobius strip. Has anyone read the Wikipedia article for Mobius strip? Okay, wow, 2 of you, amazing. Now I have to change my entire talk, I'm sorry. So this is one entry point for understanding a Mobius strip and why it works. But another way is to simply take a strip of paper, tape it together, start drawing a line down the middle of it, and you'll find that that line ends in the same place where it began. So you can understand this with your hands as like kind of like a structure that turns this two-sided surface into a one-sided surface. And I show this because it's an example of something that's vastly easier to understand in paper than it is on paper. So this is like a Wikipedia articles are usually like the most pedestrian version of whatever information you're trying to track down. And like I've read this like 10 times. I'm like, I don't know, I can't. I need to go back to school for math to like even get through it. So at the forefront of translating unsolvable, difficult problems back and forth between things that you think about with your hands and things that you can think about with a computer is really this guy named Eric Demain. And I learned about his work from a Nova documentary called The Origami Revolution, which is kind of like the Eric Demain show, because he's amazing. So many problems in science and engineering are folding and unfolding problems. And they're difficult to get at because they're difficult to model. But they can be demonstrated and sort of manipulated and explored in origami. So an example of this is by what patterns should airbags best be folded up within your steering column so that they most rapidly unfurl upon impact? Or protein sequences in DNA come folded. So what's the fewest places you need to cut one of these folded protein sequences to be able to unfurl the sequence and examine it without completely destroying the continuity of it? So by making these problems tangible, the researchers are opening them up to the human superpower of physical intuition. So there's a way to think about it on like multiple levels. And I just threw this in because it's so exciting to me that the New York Times had a really, really long article about how researchers had discovered, finally, in 2017, how ladybug wings fold up. That they're deployable structures, kind of like Chuck Hoberman's Hoberman spear or like what your umbrella does. This is what ladybug wings do. And We had a sports car floating in outer space before they discovered how ladybug wings work. So yeah, go figure. So in my own work, I realized that I can get much farther in thinking about and navigating complexity that I can't fully see if I could find a way to get my brain and my hand to work together in tandem. So as a designer, the main problem that I deal with is I get emails from people who want me to work on projects for them. And I often feel completely overwhelmed by all of the factors that go into like making the decision whether to say yes or no to these potential jobs. So I thought maybe I should just like make a paper calculator to decide for me and like outsource my important life decisions to that. So yeah, this is my Take That Job calculator. And this format is called a Vowel. So before there were computers or even calculators, there was still this need for calculation. And so people would have things like this, like the farm calculator. It's like, so how many bushels of asparagus do you want in the fall? And you turn it and you're like, 15 bushels. And it'll tell you how many seeds to get and when to plant it. These things are kind of like the apps of like the 1800s because they did one calculation really well. So you just have like an entire drawer of them. Be like, all right, where's my farm calculator? But they're really fun to play with because it puts all of the mathematics and proportion into a physical form. It's just this series of nested and cut wheels. And I wanted to take one apart and show you how it works because it doesn't come up with anything that you don't print on it. So you have to print all possible answers on this thing. And then the function of the wheels is essentially just to like winnow down the field of all possible answers to the one that you want. So I called mine the existential calculator because it was solving my existential dilemmas, otherwise known as first world problems. And it's programmed with all of this social science research about what makes people happy in work or secure and what leads to midlife crises, which boils down to 4 main considerations. What are your working conditions? Like, do you get snacks? Do you have to work in a windowless basement? How will this work improve things? Is it good for the world? Do you feel bad about yourself? You have to take a very hot shower at the end of the day. Is it a good fit for you? And what's the money like? Which people have to answer in song. So the options are like a Make It Rain, like mid-2000s hip-hop lyric, or a Bruce Springsteen, like kind of like Working America lyric, or a very sad cowboy song. So those are basically your options. So you assess those 4 different factors by turning the wheels, and then there's a little color that appears in the window right there, and that's your answer. So you flip over the back, and it's essentially this like complex infographic. So if you got red, you find red on the wheel, and then you trace out to the perimeter, and like all of the little lines you pass are conditions that apply to you. So you know, if you were in the red zone, that's pretty good because like you're making a ton of money, you're doing something that's like a really good fit for you, you get all the snacks you want. Snacks are a very important theme today, so let's talk more about that. But it also kind of makes fun of you because it's like, oh, you might actually touch the void. So it's kind of like the wheel makes it apparent that it's a joke. Like all of the different positions, like it tells you like what's awesome that you can expect, and then also like what's not awesome. So it kind of like makes fun of everyone equally. So it's like this very analog primitive experience, which isn't much different than like an online quiz, if anyone's ever taken one of those. But the difference is that if you end up somewhere that you don't want to be, you can kind of like flip it over to the other side and like think about like how you'd change your decisions to end up in a different place. And so by doing that, by showing you the whole spectrum, it sort of facilitates a conversation with the user about, you know, what their values are in work and what will make them happy. Yeah. So ideally, it's like flipped back over many times. So all of my projects kind of prod at this question: why are lo-fi things still appealing in this world where we have high tech and all of the wish fulfillment we want? And the most compelling proof that I've ever received that this is a legitimate question to ask in this modern age is the response that I received to this project that I did a while ago. This was back in 2011. So some friends of mine were getting married, and they wanted a really cool wedding invitation, which if you're a designer, you've probably been approached with this problem before. And my friends love music, and so we're like, all right, well, maybe we should make sheet music that people can perform. Maybe it's like a singing card somehow. But then we all had this memory of the specific Mr. Wizard episode where he did something amazing. He made a record player out of a piece of paper. So he took a cone of paper and taped it up and taped a needle to the end of it. And that was enough to amplify sound from these tiny grooves into audibility. And while he was doing this, he was probably like yelling at the kid who was doing it. If you haven't watched Mr. Wizard as a Dick, then you definitely do it. He's like amazing and brilliant and has all these great science experiments, but like he's just so mean to those kids. Anyway, so yeah, so we all remember this and we're like, wow, that was so cool. Like we should totally build record player wedding invitations for all your friends rather than doing something respectable and grown up. So, but the onus was on me to figure out how to make this thing work. So I started collecting needles from sewing stores, from the garment district. I went to Chinatown and bought all of the acupuncture needles. I started calling paper suppliers looking for the paper that had the best audio properties, and they thought I was totally nuts. Meanwhile, my friends Karen and Mike, the bride and groom, wrote the song inviting us to the wedding, which we put onto a flexi disc, which is a flexible, crappy record made out of acetate. They used to come like within the pages of like Rolling Stone or Maximum Rock and Roll whenever they had like a single to promote. So you could like shake the magazine, and instead of like the subscribe things coming out, like a flexi disc might come out. And we made the decision to use like such a thin format because I wanted it to be completely transparent. So this is a clear flexi disc, and everything that you see in black is printed on it. And then everything that you see in color is underneath it. And that way, you could rotate it, and like every 90 degrees, it like completes your friends in a different scenario. So here are Karen and Mike playing music together. And if you rotate it another 90 degrees, they're eating and drinking and being merry. And then growing old together in funny old person clothes. And I decided to do this, like it was basically a decision made just out of fear, because even though I had tested like all of the components for these record players, everything was coming in at the last second. We had a week to assemble. There was no time to get things remade. And so I was like, well, if it doesn't work, this is at least like a design fallback justification for why they're getting this odd format. So yeah, design decisions made out of fear. It's not so bad. But yeah, it really did work. So here's how. The device corrals minute sound vibrations up into this tented A shape. There's a little tiny needle right at the end of that dot. And then you turn it at 45 RPM. Yeah, thanks. And then this is what the real song sounds like, just for comparison. Yeah, I want to be upfront that it sounded really shitty, but it did sound like the song, so. Yeah, but so I was really excited about this because it was like a personal victory that happened on my kitchen table. I was like, yes, it works. My friends are happy with me. But I uploaded it to the internet, and all of these other people I didn't know were excited too. And I was like, what is going on? It's like we're all sitting around complaining about like how Spotify doesn't have like some obscure album that we want, and like the quality isn't high enough on MP3, and we want FLAC, and yet like here's this thing that like barely works, and all these people are excited about it. It's like, guys, it doesn't sound good. So I had felt like I stumbled upon this interesting question that I hadn't heard anyone at the time asking, and I thought about it and realized that there's kind of this weird dimension and our relationship with our things that modern tech just like doesn't get yet. So modern tech, this is my representation of modern tech. Modern tech like gives us what we want, you know, whatever we ask for, complete wish fulfillment. And it fulfills this desire and stated purpose of tech to like ease the burden of humanity and do our work for us. This is down the street from where I live. This is a paper stack cutter, and it's literally their logo is like, we're going to turn back time. Just imagine all the time you're going to get back because you're not cutting every piece of paper, which is like totally what technology is all about. But what modern tech doesn't do in its black boxness is make the world legible to us in like human sensory terms. So Brett Victor wrote this really great essay that like makes the case that the scatter plot graph is actually this really important, unacknowledged human victory and invention, because it makes information bioavailable in a way that it wasn't before. So just to show you what he's talking about, like this on the left is like a spreadsheet of random numbers. And then on the right, we have a scatter plot graph. So like you couldn't feed this spreadsheet into a human mind and have it make any sense. But as soon as you take it and you put it on a map, you're instantly opening it up to, you know, this human superpower of navigating space things like a map, like spatially, our spatial reasoning skills. So immediately you can see like all the relationships between the numbers, you can see where the outliers are, you can see the distribution. So it's like a way of using like how our human hardware has evolved to be built in a way that like makes those numbers instantly recognizable. We just intellectually think about the world through our bodies like more than it is acknowledged, like through touch and through friction and resistance. All of these things are information. The nervous system doesn't just end with the brain alone. It extends all the way to the skin. So, you know, all information, not just like the touchy-feely stuff, even technical information flows in through our senses. There's this really great quote by Hermann von Helmholtz. He's like a 18th century physicist that says, you know, all we know, everything is an event on the skin. You know, every time we see something or read something, that's light hitting or photons hitting our retina. You know, every time we hear something, those are molecules disturbed in the air that are coming in and being perceived by our eardrums. We are simply hardwired to have this very deep, rich, intellectual and philosophical life through our tangible exchanges with physical things. To demonstrate this all to you, I am showing you the stop motion animation I made out of paper for TinyBop for their human body app, which is like a way for kids to physically explore the human body. So with like older mechanical tech, it was often fussy and glitchy and kind of crappy and frustrating, but it gave us something that black box tech doesn't. It gives us a connection point to the larger physical world around us. Because when you're like fussing with an antenna or trying to like unstick your clock, you know, you're actually dealing with this physical reality that you don't get to sort of interface with otherwise. So as an artist, whenever I work on an animation project, I let things be unapologetically physical. So I try to get the viewer's sense of touch involved as well as their visual mode. So I often like leave in noise, I show the seams, it's really clear what scale everything is. Yeah, all of these little like palimpsest of actual physical things that happen. Like this one, when I was like coming up with the way that the bird was flying over the scene, like so many people were like, I can see the strings. And I was like, yes, but that's the point. And it's like, I don't know, we all have these memories of like flying kites. And so in a way, like my hand is a stand-in for yours, the viewers, that there's like this sort of like sympathetic, empathetic exchange that can't happen when things are like too pristine and too clean. It's too far removed from, I think, the experience that we crave. Which is why I think people were super into this, is because it brings all of that information that you remember from school about sound as vibration and how it works with your eardrums. And it brings it as close to human experience as possible. Because like, rather than being told that this is how sound works, you can put your hand on the record and turn it, and like your movement is syncopated with the needle and the groove in a way that really like drives the point home. So learning from that project, the best thing I could do, I think, with my design work at this point is sort of facilitate those kinds of revelations and those kinds of experiences to help people sort of navigate the physical world in a way that's interesting and engaging and then also informative. So I've been teaching myself paper engineering these past few years. So I can make projects like this. So this is a book called This Book is a Camera, which is one of the most literal book titles of all time, I think. So it's a paper camera and a pop-up book that you go into the dark, you can load in photo paper to the back, and then you take it outside, and by lifting this little dark slide, it's like lifting a gate that allows light to go through a pinhole, hit the photo paper, and then you can develop it in instant coffee and baking soda. So it's kind of like this like shoestring, desert island kind of photography, which you think would look terrible, but it actually makes like pretty cool photos because it's large format photography, so it's like 4 inches by 5 inches, so you get a lot of visual information on it. This is standing on top of the Whitney Museum, and this is a photo that I took on the Brooklyn Bridge. And it's lensless photography, so you're not focusing and making a choice about what's in focus, so everything kind of comes in on a flat plane. And so you can see that the rivets on the Brooklyn Bridge are kind of like the same amount in focus the whole way down, which gives it this really unique look that you can't emulate in Photoshop or, with any kind of lens photography. So I self-published this a couple of years ago when I was an Adobe Creative Resident, and then MoMA republished it, so it's actually kind of gotten out there in the world. So hopefully you'll see more people looking super cool in public places while everyone else is like using their smartphone. So this is by far the biggest project I've worked on. Again, I'm like the queen of literal titles. So if like anyone has like a murder mystery novel that you want to completely destroy, like come talk to me. This is my talent in life, is titling books. So this one is called This Book is a Planetarium, and it has a planetarium in it, but it also has these 6 other gadgets. So it's a book that reduces all of these various tech things down to just paper, so that when you interact with it and it actually works, you're interacting directly with these laws of physics rather than interacting with like an interface. I'm just trying to like reduce the amount of stuff in between the person and the magic. So yeah, I'm going to show you. I made this in my apartment about the book. Yeah, so I think that book is the reason. Oh, thanks. Have any of you been to the Exploratorium in San Francisco? A lot of people, cool. Yeah, I think that's why I got invited to be a fellow at the Exploratorium, because it's kind of like if their exhibits were pared down to just paper. Yeah, after spending some time there, I feel like it'd be really fun to do a book on like visual perception and like sort of highlight some different things. Anyway, yeah, that was fun. And it's funny because kids like it, and I get like these amazing emails from people that are like, oh, my kid loves it so much that like they won't go to sleep without seeing the planetarium. But I've watched children using this book, and by far the most popular thing is the perpetual calendar, which is very confusing to me, because it was so not fun to me that I was like almost didn't put it in the book. I was like, oh, time, it's such a drag. But kids are like, oh, I'm going to be 20 one day. What day of the week does my birthday fall on? And like, yeah. So if you have any insight into like why that's the most fun thing for kids, like come talk to me, because I'm confused. Yeah, so since the book came out, I've been thinking more about paper as tech, like using paper to do functional things and interact with the world in interesting ways. And I recently taught a class at the School for Poetic Computation on this topic, where we explored pop-up books and paper engineering and computational origami, just all kinds of things. Like there are all these like disparate fields that are sort of like touching upon this paper as tech thing, but they all need to be friends, so we're like trying to bring that all together. And I put our research from the class up at the site, cutfoldtemplates.com. So the hexaflexagon we're making is actually like, there's a pattern online in case you like want to turn it into a client project or something. You can download the vector templates, design it. It's all here. There's a little bit of history on each mechanism. Some mechanisms, like we know where they come from, but others we do not. So you can see that there's like a very great disparity in the amount of information written about each thing. And I co-organized this class with this computational origami guy called Robbie Kraft, who's making this amazing thing on origami where you can fold origami and then see where the folds are affected in the sheet. So he has been iterating on this, and I think that it's probably going to come out pretty soon. So yeah, check out rabbitear.org. I also like made this set of risograph prints that are all about sort of the mechanical life of folds, taking different patterns that are common in the paper engineering world and talking about like what their potential tech applications are. So this is an auxetic pattern made by Ron Resch. This one is a modified version of the water bomb fold. And so you fold up these sheets, and the water bomb fold is really interesting because it's one of the most popular origami patterns, and it's being used in nanotech to like create like small tunable structures, like things like antennas. Yeah, which is really super crazy. The Moriori fold is perhaps my favorite because it's a metamaterial, so if you stretch it up down, it also stretches left-right simultaneously. And this is like used in, it's also used in nanotech to make these programmable skins, because if you poke your finger and like turn some of those little mountains inside out, the entire structure will collapse around it, but not smush that part. So you can make programmable skins where parts of the skin is like soft and collapsible and other parts are hard. This is also used in the Japan Space Flyer program to like, they put up a satellite array of solar panels because they basically needed the solar panels to track with the sun. And the easiest way to do that was with this structure that if you pull it in one direction, everything moves simultaneously. So yeah, it's like, this paper tech class was so fun because we're like, could you build anything out of paper? Like, what if, Japanese origami, rather than linkages, like sort of won out in the Industrial Revolution and the entire world was made of paper folds? Like, will we ever get to cars? Or like, would we be standing on the street and it would like shimmy us places? Like, it's like, will we have like climate crisis? I don't know. Like, so we like really, really had drunk our own Kool-Aid, but it was super fun. Yeah, so this is the official end of my talk, but I wanted to show you some of my favorite lo-fi magic things. So people often ask me where I get my inspiration. I think the biggest source right now, I would say, is the Exploratorium, But there's also like a lot of artists that are working with mysteries of perception. A lot of California's light and space artists, like Robert Irwin, Doug Wheeler, James Turrell, they make this work that sort of goes beyond like what scientists understand about perception and demonstrates some things. So that work is really, really exciting to me. Mobius strips are still super exciting to me. I will never understand how they work, you know. But there's also things like kids' science books that you can like take them apart, mine them for graphic design ideas. There's a guy at Stanford named Manu Prakash who's invented a really inexpensive paper microscope called the Foldoscope and has this whole vision of citizen science where you know, instead of having like just a handful of really expensive microscopes locked in ivory towers, like what if we give like 1 million microscopes to kids? Like what kind of data will we get? Like what kind of information could we learn from the world that way? So, you know, when you change the tools and you change tech and you change the materials, you know, you often like put forth this different philosophy about like how we could gain information, which is really exciting to me. So let's finish up our project. So I hope none of you skipped ahead because I need to tell you something about the laser printing. So the laser printing might peel off onto your sticky square. So what you might want to do is in the areas where you're putting glue, your little sticky squares, you might want to like peel off a little bit of that paper so the white of the paper is exposed. I didn't realize this until this morning. But you know, if anyone has like started gluing it, you'll see that laser printing, like sometimes it will stick and come off on the thing. But yeah, but the basic idea is that it says glue 1, glue 2, glue 3, glue 4. You want to glue 1 to glue 1, glue 2 to glue 2. So it's pretty self-explanatory here, but what we're making is essentially like a geometric tube. It's not really necessary that you peel off the paper where the laser print is, it's just that it might be more durable if you do. It might get like a better adhesion there. Oh look, some people are done. No pressure. Does anyone need me to talk them through this step, or is it like? And the glue dots, there's kind of a trick to it. So on the squares, there's one side that's small and one side that's larger. I think it's easier if you peel off the small side first, stick it down, and then you have a tab once it's on there. Does anyone want to ask me questions while you're working on this step? Just throw it up here like a tomato if you want me to, yeah. But does anyone have any like Q&A questions that I could answer while we're all folding? Yeah, totally. Could someone repeat her question so I can hear it?
I could take the microphone down to this person.
Ooh, thank you.
I'm here.
Sorry I didn't give you any.
Where are you?
Jesse.
Raise your hand. Okay.
Hi.
Hey.
Thank you for a really nice presentation. It was really inspiring. My question was, what kind of digital software are you using? Because you're very software, hands down, otherwise.
Yeah, so I mostly feel the most comfortable with Illustrator and Photoshop because that's kind of what I learned on. So with all of the paper engineering stuff, I draw all of the lines in vector in Illustrator, and I'll have a layer that says cut and another layer that says score. And that way I can like really easily output to a laser cutter or a vinyl cutter. There are all these like desktop cutters that are sort of like, they're marketed towards like scrapbooking moms, like the Craft Robo, the Silhouette. These things are like really super useful in doing this kind of work because you can very quickly like prototype it. And the vinyl cutters like work with a blade rather than with a laser. So yeah, it's pretty cool. But I don't know, like I code like a little bit, like I know open frameworks a little bit, but yeah, mostly I'm just doing things, you know, I appreciate generative art, but I don't usually do things that way. You know, my mind kind of works in this like, oh, this goal-oriented, like maybe I should try this, maybe I should try this kind of way rather than like changing variables and like seeing what happens, if that makes sense. But yeah. Who else has a question? You all are so studious.
Everybody's busy working.
Who's ready for the next step?
There's a next step?
Oh, look, some of you are like, I'm done. Ready for drinks.
Let's take it to the next step.
Okay, yeah, let's take it for the next step. So the last step, which you might have anticipated, is you're going to glue your whole tube together like this. And this is one where it's going to really want to pull apart. So there might be some advantage to like pulling off the laser printing and like sort of exposing the paper there. But
Nice.
Where's yours, Jesse? Why only got us to one?
I see a lot of geometric tubes. Awesome. Yeah, cool. For those of you who are even farther ahead, you always need to train paper, so you kind of need to gently coax it into doing this. So it'll be like super eager to like go through the whole hexaflexagon cycle once you've done it once, but just kind of like feel it out, like ease it into this kind of motion once you get it glued together. All right, what step do we want to see? Most people are here. Oh my gosh, yay! If you finished yours and you feel like you have some insight and your neighbor is still working on it, like, yeah, help them. Yeah. Okay, so I just got a question. What was my first memory of touching paper? I don't know. I wasn't like a giant origami kid. I did make origami and I did play with pop-up books. So I think that those experiences were memorable to me. But I've always been a person who made things. But I'm also interested in culture and I'm interested in like people's response to things and like how that resonates with the zeitgeist. So like when people responded to that paper record player wedding invitation, I was like, oh, this is interesting. Like I've really like figured out something about the world that I'm curious about and I can continue to question it by making things and engaging with this. So it's something that like kind of came from my childhood, but like also just came from an adult curiosity. Sorry, I can't see you all at all. Is everyone happy or does anyone need more help or guidance with gluing this thing together? Cool, I think we're maybe done. I have pop-up books for sale that I can like sign. I'm gonna be sitting out in the courtyard. Yeah, and thank you all so much for being an awesome audience and being so nice.